Shalom Mashpaka, greetings to you in the name of Yahusha HaMashiach, to all the 12 tribes who are scattered to the ends of the earth. Greetings to you in Yahusha Elohim. Today's topic is very crucial for us to understand because over a few days I've been sharing upon the beast and the beastly system which has risen in among the Hebrews, and the movement of going back to keeping the Sabbaths and the feasts of Yahuah in pagan lands has been prominent among the Hebrew groups. And then there are the other Torah-less people who always speak about new covenant, old is history, and therefore it is a wormhole, and we can only read it from a history perspective. So we are seeing two sides of the same coin, where Ha-Shatan is seated within the temple of Elohim, where the carnal man sits as Elohim, the man of sin, the son of perdition, speaking great blasphemies against Yahusha and against his kingdom. So therefore it's very important for us to understand, being in pagan lands, are we to keep Shabbats and feasts? So I'm going to show a lot of evidence from scriptures for you to decide where you are, because I see people taking bits and pieces of Torah and of Shemitah and trying to show that they are doing service to Yahusha by growing long beards, wearing those caps, kippas, and wearing priesthood garments, showing that they are Kadash. And where is all this coming in from? So this video will explore the question of whether the Shabbats and feasts of Yahuah, as outlined in Leviticus 23, should be observed by those living outside the land of YasharEL, referred to here as pagan lands. So it presents a detailed scriptural and historical analysis, arguing that these observances are intrinsically tied to the land of YasharEL, specifically Yerushalayim, where Yahuah chose to place his name. So drawing from Torah, prophetic writings and renewed testament text, the note or this video will contend that the dispersion of YasharEL and Yahudah into foreign soil, coupled with the spiritual transition ushered in by Yahusha Mashiach, renders the physical observance of these appointed times obsolete outside the designated land. So the note emphasizes a shift from a physical to a spiritual understanding of these practices rooted in the redemptive work of Yahusha. So let's begin by reading Leviticus chapter 23, verses 2 and 3. It says, "Speak to the sons of YasharEL and say to them, the appointed times of Yahuah, which you shall proclaim them as Kodesh convocations, my appointed times, they are these." So the Hebrew word for my appointed times is Muadai. I've tested it in Paleo Hebrew. Muadai, Strong's H4150. And it says in verse 3, "For 6 days work shall be done, but on the 7th day there is a Shabbat of complete rest, a Kodesh convocation. You shall not do any work. It is a Shabbat to Yahuah in all your dwellings." So we see Yahuah puts the weekly Shabbat as a moad, or an appointed time, and here it is the reason why he does that, because the weekly Shabbat, which is the 7th day, stated as Muadai, which is my appointed times in Leviticus 23 verses 2, along with the 7 feasts stated after this in the same chapter. So in a 365-day calendar, there were exactly 52 Shabbats. So 52 into 7, exactly 52 Shabbats. So these are excluding the high Shabbats of the feasts. Adding them would be a total 59 Shabbats in an annual year. So the high Shabbats total to 7. And how is that? 2 high Shabbats of the unleavened bread, the first day and the last day. All right. Then Shavuot or Pentecost, that was also a high Shabbat. The Feast of Trumpets in the 7th month was a high Shabbat. Yom Kippur, which is the Day of Atonement, was a high Shabbat. And 2 high Shabbats of the first day and the last day of the Feast of Sukkot or Feast of Tabernacles. So total 7 high Shabbats. 2 high Shabbats of unleavened bread, 2, Shavuot 3, Feast of Trumpet 4, Yom Kippur 5, and 6 and 7 of Sukkot. So 52 weekly Shabbats plus 7 high Shabbats make it 59 annual Shabbats. Annual means in a year. So the Shavuot, that is the Pentecost, alright, 7 into 7 is the first count of the annual Shabbat from first fruits, which falls tomorrow after the weekly Shabbat of the unleavened bread. So there is a pattern of 7 into 7 plus 1, alright, which is all tied up to the Shemitah of the land, which we will see how Yahuah always says that when you cross over into the land of the Canaanites, alright, then you shall observe these. So it's tied to the Shemitah of the land. So these 7 high Shabbats occur annually, including in a Jubilee year as the Jubilee. Leviticus 25 verses 10. It says, "You shall thus consecrate the year, the 50th year, and proclaim a release throughout the land to all its inhabitants. It shall be a Jubilee for you, and each of you shall return to his own property, and each of you shall return to his family." So the Shabbat pattern was placed as 7 into 7 plus 1, pointing out to a Jubilee pattern, alright, so which was concealed in the feast of Shavuot. Okay, so that pattern was concealed in that particular feast. So the first point we will see is the conventional observance and the divine order. So that appointed times, which is the Muadim, alright, where Leviticus 23 verses 2 and 3 designates the weekly Shabbat and the feasts with the high Shabbat as Yahuah's appointed times, set apart moments for communion with him. So these 59 Shabbats collectively represent a rhythm of rest, worship, and set apartness woven into the annual cycle, reflecting Yahuah's divine order for YasharEL's life in the land. Alright, so it was also a sign of the covenant. So the Shabbat is a perpetual sign of the covenant between Yahuah and YasharEL. So when you read Exodus chapter 31 verses 16 and 17, we read, "And the children of YasharEL shall guard the Shabbat to perform the Shabbat throughout their generations as an everlasting covenant." Verse 17, "Between me and the children of YasharEL, it is a sign forever, for in 6 days Yahuah made the heavens and the earth, and on the 7th day he rested and was refreshed." So the first word that we see over here is the word sign, which is the Oth, Aleph, Waw, Tau. Alright, and the sign, like I always say, is a signpost pointing out to a purpose or a destination. Okay, so that is what we need to keep in mind. And the word Olam, which is Strong's H5769, alright, which is translated in English as forever and ever. Olam u Olam, that's what they say in Hebrew. So, but if you see, Olam is a vanishing point, and it does not mean that it is in the sense of forever, but in a Hebraic mindset of a past event, into the future, searching for a goal. Like for example, Elohim made the lights and set them for signs and appointed times, and it finds its fulfillment in its eternal purpose in Mashiach, when the actual 6,000 years designated for mankind comes to a completion, and the elect enter into his 7th day rest. So hence Olam is a vanishing point from the past to its eternal perspective. So when you read Genesis chapter 1 verses 14, it says, "And Elohim said, let lights come to be in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night, and let them be for signs and appointed times, and for days and years. So the same word auth for signs, all right, which is again pointing out to a future destination point, all right. When you arrive at the destination, you no longer require the signs. And appointed times, muadim, the same word which is used for feasts. Okay, so you see here, when Elohim set the lights in the firmament, all right, he kept it with as a sign pointing out. So that was the first, point, and it became a vanishing point when it finds its fulfillment and goal in Yahusha HaMashiach, all right, who is the goal of the olam, the end, end product, or the object of worship, the one whom we have the appointment with. So when you take a doctor's appointment, all right, so once you have met the doctor, okay, so you can only say that, okay, I had an appointment with the doctor and I met with the doctor. So you take an appointment, right, to meet with the doctor. So till you take that appointment and till you're about to meet with the doctor, so you're curious to know, all right, what kind of sickness you have, and what the doctor is going to say or diagnose or heal you. So I'm just giving you an analogy, all right. So but once you have had the appointment with Yahusha HaMashiach, all right, so he is the goal of the Torah, because he is the living Torah. So just by growing long beards, wearing kippas, and putting on priesthood garments, showing yourself kadash, and saying that, oh, I'm connected to the covenant, does not make you a covenanted man. So that's what I'm trying to say. And speaking about the seventh day rest, right? Remember, in these past few studies, I've been talking about the 6,000 years, Genesis 6 verses 3, which Yahuah designated for mankind, for carnal man, that his ruach is not going to strive with him. So his days were numbered for 120 years, which talks about the Jubilee, because 120 into 50 is 6,000 years, which is designated for man. And the 7,000 years, the 7,000th year is the year of rest. And we see Genesis chapter 1, all right, all the 7 days, 6 days of creation, and the seventh day where Yahuwah rested, all is pointed out towards the rest that he had, which is the rest that has been promised to us in Yahusha HaMashiach. So till that we arrive to that appointed time, to Yahusha HaMashiach, which we already have in the Ruach. It's a little interim waiting time for us to get into the marriage supper of the Lamb. I will cover this in detail throughout the study. But for now, let's read Hebrews chapter 4 verses 8 to 10. For if Yahushua or Joshua had given them rest, he would not have spoken of another day after that. Verse 9, so there remains a Shabbat rest for the people of Elohim. Verse 10, for the one having entered into his rest has himself also rested from his works, as Elohim rested from his own. So the 59 Shabbats encompassing both weekly rest and festal high days underscore YasharEl's unique relationship with Yahuwah, marked by obedience to his commands and dependence on his provision, especially in the land where his name dwells. So connection to the land and Shemitah. So land-specific worship. The emphasis of scriptures is that the Shabbats and feasts are tied to the land of YasharEl, particularly Yerushalayim. So when you read 2 Chronicles 6 verses 6, but I have chosen Yerushalayim for my name to be there, and I have chosen David to be over my people, YasharEl. Okay, so David, the Davidic covenant is the messianic covenant where he was promised that the son of David, he will be seated on the throne forever and ever. That's the reason Yahusha is called as the son of David. And he himself, Yahusha in the book of Revelation says that I am the bright and morning star, the root and offspring of David. Right? So that is the Davidic covenant. So, but I have chosen Yerushalayim for my name to be there, and I have chosen David to be over my people, YasharEL. So it does not mean that David will be, the King David will be seated on the throne, but it is talking about Yahusha HaMashiach. So the 59 Shabbats are significant as they are fully realized only in the context of the promised land, where agricultural cycles, example leaving the land fallow, which is spoken of in Leviticus 26 verses 34 and 35, and pilgrimage feasts align with Yahuwah's commands, where 3 times a year every male had to appear before Yahuwah. If they was living in any part of the world, they had to come to Yerushalayim to worship Yahuwah 3 times a year, as long as the temple existed. So Shemitah and Jubilee foreshadowing. The scriptural perspective connects the Shabbats to the Shemitah, the 7-year cycle, and Jubilee, the 50th year. It's Leviticus 25 verses 8 to 10. We read Leviticus 25 verses 10 already. So the 59 Shabbats in a year mirror the broader pattern of sevens. Example, 7 into 7 is 49 plus 1 for Jubilee, symbolizing rest, release, and restoration. In a Jubilee year, the 59 Shabbats reinforce the theme of liberation, returning land and people to their original state. Leviticus 25:10. You can read these scriptures later. Now, how does it fit in the spiritual and eschatological symbolism? So the cycles of 7, so the number 59 has got 52 weekly Shabbats plus 7 high Shabbats, and it fits into the scriptural patterns of sevens, which is a pervasive in this presentation. Example, 7 high Shabbats, 7-year cycle, 7 years of captivity. 7 signifies completeness and divine perfection. Example, creation in 7 days, Genesis chapter 2 verses 2 to 3. 7 seals in Chazun, in the book of Chazun, that is Revelation. Then we have 7 trumpets, 7 candlesticks. So all these point out to the Shemitah. So the 59 Shabbats reflect a near complete cycle of rest within a year, pointing to the ultimate rest in Yahuwah's redemptive plan. Transition to the spiritual rest. Alright. So the physical Shabbats transition to a spiritual reality in Yahusha HaMashiach. 1 Corinthians 5 verses 7, which says that he is the Pishak lamb who was sacrificed for us. Galatians 4:25. Alright. It also speaks about the 2 covenants, which we will see later. So the 59 Shabbats tied to a physical land foreshadow the eternal Shabbat rest fulfilled in Yahusha's sacrifice. Hebrews 4:9 verses 10. 9 to 10. So the notes reference to Yahusha's impalement or crucifixion on a high Shabbat, John 19:31, suggests that the 59 Shabbats find the ultimate significance in his role as the Passover lamb, completing the covenantal cycle. Historical and prophetic context, the dispersion and cessation. In Hosea chapter 2 verses 11, where Yahuwah declares an end to YasharEL Shabbats and feasts in dispersion, and the same is reiterated in the book of Revelation. Alright, and in 2 Chronicles 26 verses 36 verses 21, where the land enjoyed its Shabbat while Yahudah remained in captivity in Babylon. Alright, and so the land enjoyed its Shabbat in desolation because people, the poor of the land, left behind ate of what grew of itself. There was no sowing and reaping. There was no Shemitah. There was a cessation of that Shemitah until the captivity was completed. So during this 70-year Babylonian captivity, so the 59 Shabbats were neglected, as in the 70 Shemitah cycles led to judgment, highlighting their significance as a measure of YasharEL's faithfulness or disobedience. Prophetic signs. So this presentation interprets calendar disputes among Hebrew camps as evidence of spiritual darkness. Joel's prophecy of the sun and moon darkening. The 59 Shabbats, when misaligned due to the competing calendars, signify YasharEL's fractured state, awaiting restoration through Yahusha's return. The numerological and typological patterns. While 59 is not explicitly highlighted in scripture, It derives from the sum of 52 weekly Shabbats and 7 high Shabbats, aligning with the note's emphasis on sevens. So the number 7 is central to scriptural numerology. Example: 7 feasts, 7 trumpets, 7 seals, 7 plagues, etc. And 59 as a composite reflects the fullness of Yahuwah's appointed times in a year. So the typology of release: this presentation connects the Jubilee, which is the 50th year, to the Pentecontad calendar's 50-day cycles, 7 into 7 plus 1. So the 59 Shabbats occurring in a Jubilee year symbolize the culmination of rest and release, prefiguring the ultimate liberation from sin and bondage through Yahusha. Matthew 1:17, Galatians 3:16. So these 59 Shabbats are in 1 year. So in a Jubilee year, it would be 59 into 50. Okay. Practical and theological implications. Obedience in the land. For ancient YasharEL, observing all 59 Shabbats was a tangible act of trust in Yahusha's provision, Yahuwah's provision, as ceasing work, especially during high Shabbats and Jubilee, required reliance on his sustenance, because sowing and reaping, had a labor in it, and what was reaped, depended upon their obedience to Yahuwah. Because if you didn't obey Yahuwah, then he would send famine, he would send captivity, he would send the sword. So all this depended upon their obedience in the land. So call to spiritual discernment. So the presentation urges readers to see the 59 Shabbats as a part of a physical system fulfilled in Yahusha, who transitions believers from carnal observances to spiritual worship. Hebrews chapter 13 verses 13 and 14. Their significance lies in pointing to the greater reality of rest in the renewed creation. So let's read Hebrews chapter 13 verses 12 to 14. It says, "And so Yahusha also suffered outside the gate to set apart the people with his own blood." Verse 13, "Let us then go to him outside the camp, bearing his reproach." Verse 14, "For we have no lasting city here, but we seek the one coming." Okay, so hence the post-Babylonian captivity, some of the Yahudites, because of the 70 years of captivity for not observing the 70 Shemitah cycles, when in the land, were careful and broke down their Shabbats into 7 into 7 plus 1, which is 50 days, and named their 50th day as Atzeret. Alright, and in Hebrew, Atzeret means a solemn assembly or concluding festival. So they started following the Pentecontad calendar. Alright, the Greek word is Pentecontas, which is an agricultural calendar system thought to be of an Amorite origin, in which the year is broken down into 7 periods of 50 days, a total of 350 days, with an annual supplement of 15 or 16 days. So in Akkadian, the Pentecontad calendar was known as Ham Satum, and the period of 15 days at the end of the year was known to Babylonians as Shapatum. So the liturgical year of the Essenes at Qumran was a Pentecontad calendar marked by festivals on the last day of each 50-day period, such as the Feast of the New Wine, the Feast of Oil, and the Feast of New Wheat. Now you analyze, brethren, after I read all these calendars and all the borrowed terminology and and the calendar system from the Akkadian, from the Amorites, from Essenes at Qumran, right? So many calendars floating today in each camp. It shows that everybody is in deep deception, because everyone is saying that their calendar is the true calendar, and some of them, off the top of my head, is the solar calendar. Some follow the lunar calendar, some follow the lunisolar calendar, and some follow the Pentecontad calendar. because there are a set of people who just scrub and search out what they found in Dead Sea Scrolls, and based upon that have created this Pentecontat calendar, saying that even the Essenes obeyed and followed this type of calendar. So there are variety of calendar systems, some of which may represent a transition from the more ancient lunar phase week toward the modern fixed week. Among these various calendars can be found the fixed 7-day week in a calendar of 52 weeks, which include 7-week cycles, just like the ancient lunar phase calendars. Now, how they broke up the annual year into 15 to 7 is a mystery to me. For me, when I see so much division in the Hebrew camps, with each one stating my calendar is true and hating the others, is evidence as stated by the prophet Yoel that in the last days the sun will be turned dark, the moon into blood, and the stars will fall before the great day of Yahuah. Remember Genesis 1 verse 14, Yahuah set the lights in the firmament and gave them as signs and for appointed times. So they have made these calendars and are fighting over these calendars, which is a sign to us that the sun has turned dark, the moon into blood, and the stars have fallen before the great day of Yahuah. So the sign is clearly visible and understood spiritually, as stated earlier that the sun, moon and stars stood figuratively for YasharEL. You can also see that in Joseph's dream. He saw the sun, moon and 11 stars bowing down to him, and it refers to YasharEL. Alright, and he himself was the 12th star. In Revelation chapter 12, the woman clothed with the sun, moon under her feet and crown of 12 stars, covenant YasharEL, again speaks about YasharEL, where the sun, moon and stars reflect YasharEL. So if the sun, moon and stars have darkened and have stopped giving its light, and this is the sign that Yahuwah has given us, then we should know that it is near, it is at the doors. So if Leviticus 23 puts Shabbat as a Muadei, that is my appointed time, then it has to be in the land. So let me show you how. It says in Exodus 13 verses 5, "It shall be when Yahuwah brings you to the land of the Canaanite, the Hittite, the Amorite, and the Chewite, and the Jebusite, which he swore to your fathers to give you, a land flowing with milk and honey, that you shall observe this service in the month." Verse 6, "For 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread, and on the 7th day there shall be a feast to Yahuwah." Verse 7, "Unleavened bread shall be eaten the 7 days, and nothing leavened shall be seen among you, nor shall any leaven be seen among you in all your borders." So there we go. It says in the land, when Yahuwah brings you to the land. Alright, that's when all this thing shall kickstart. That's what it means. Okay, and Deuteronomy 12 verses 5, "But you shall seek to the place which Yahuwah your El shall choose from all your tribes to establish his name there for his dwelling, and there you shall come." Deuteronomy 16 verses 2, "You shall sacrifice the Passover to Yahuwah your El from the flock and the herd in the place where Yahuwah chooses to establish his name there." Okay, now some Hebrew camps twist all these words to say, oh, Yahuwah has chosen, for example, I live in India, in Mumbai. Oh, so Yahuwah has chosen Mumbai or in India as a place where he has chosen to establish his name there. Sorry, my friend, it doesn't work that way. He had chosen Yerushalayim, alright, which is the place where Yahuwah chose to establish his name there. Deuteronomy 26 verses 2, "That you shall take some of the first of all the produce of the ground which you bring in from your land, that Yahuwah your El gives you, and you shall put it in a basket and go to the place where Yahuwah your Elohim chooses to establish his name." Now my question to those who say that, okay, India is the place where Yahuwah your Elohim has chosen to establish his name. So based upon the country or where you are, all right, that is the place Yahuwah has chosen. So you observe the Shabbat and the Muadim, that is the feast in the land. And my question to you is then, why in the old covenant, in Masha's Torah, is it written that every male who is scattered to the ends of the earth 3 times a year had to come to Yerushalayim? Why did Yahuwah not give them a command? Okay, you remain in your place, be in India, just offer your sacrifice, build an altar, offer your sacrifice over there, and that's about it. You are good to go because you're observing Torah. Is that the way we need to understand it? How ridiculous this can be. Please understand these important aspects, beloved. You are playing with fire, those who are thinking that they are doing service to Yahuwah by observing bits and pieces of the Shemitah in pagan lands. 1 Kings 14:21. Now Rehoboam the son of Solomon reigned in Yahudah. Rehoboam was 41 years old when he became king, and he reigned 17 years in Yerushalayim, the city which Yahuwah had chosen from all the tribes of YasharEL to put his name there, and his mother's name was Naamah the Ammonite. So which was the city that Yahuwah chose to put his name there? Yerushalayim. That's where the temple was. 2 Kings 21 verses 4. And he built altars in the house of Yahuwah, of which Yahuwah had said in Yerushalayim, I shall put my name. 2 Chronicles 6 verses 6. But I have chosen Yerushalayim, that my name to be there, and I have chosen David to be over my people YasharEL. 3 times a year it was compulsory that every male, whichever part of the world he was in, had to come to Yerushalayim for the 3 pilgrim feasts: unleavened bread, Shavuot or Pentecost as we say, and number 3, that is Sukkot or Feast of Tabernacles. Now you tell me, alright, those who are following the Shabbat and you are following the feasts of Yahuwah, which Yerushalayim are you going up to? 3 times a year, are you obeying this command? Or are you just doing bits and pieces of Torah in your pagan land? You can't do that. Psalms 137. Alright, we'll read a bit later, but doesn't it say that by the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down, there we wept when we remembered Sion. We hung our harps on the tree, on the willows, and there our captors asked for a song, to sing a song of Yahuwah. How shall we sing the song of Yahuwah on foreign soil? All the new moons, the feast, the Shabbats, everything ceased. We see the historical perspective, beloved. If you don't understand the historical perspective, all right, when Yahudah could not observe the Shabbats and the pagan in pagan lands, or the feast in pagan lands, how can you? Exodus 23 verses 14 to 17. It says, 3 times a year you shall celebrate a feast to me. Verse 15, you shall observe the feast of unleavened bread. For 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread, as I commanded you at the appointed time in the month Abib. For in it you came from Mizraim, and none shall appear before me empty-handed. Verse 16, and the feast of the harvest of the first fruits of your labors, which you sow in the field, and the feast of ingathering at the end of the year, when you gather your labors from the field. Verse 17, 3 times in a year, all your males shall appear before the face of the Adon, Yahuwah. Deuteronomy 16:16, 3 times in a year, all your males shall appear before Yahuwah, your El, in the place which he chooses it, at the feast of unleavened bread, at the feast of Shavuot, and at the feast of Sukkot. And they shall not appear before Yahuwah empty-handed. So the Torah is explicitly telling us 3 times a year, every male should appear before Yahuwah in the place where he chooses it. And the place we saw that he chose was Yerushalayim, not India. Okay, beloved? I hope this is very clear to you. And even if you say it is India, so where are you going up to India with your gifts to Yahuah in your assembly? Wonderful. Keep it up. So what have we covered so far? Shabbat is listed with the Moed or the feast in Leviticus 23. There are so many calendars floating, with each camp saying they are right with their calendar, hating each other, passing comments against each other, saying you are false, you are a false apostle, you are a false prophet, etc. So the evidence is very clear of the sun, moon and stars darkening, and Yahuah has sent the lying spirit in the mouth of his prophets who are teaching lies, putting fear of Torahlessness for not observing the feast and the Sabbaths. The Moed or the feast had to be in the place where Yahuah chooses his name to be called. Yerushalayim was the place Yahuah chose to call his name upon. 3 times a year every male had to appear before Yahuah, not without a gift. And the 3 times was at the feast of unleavened bread, the feast of Shavuot, that is Pentecost, and at the feast of Sukkot, which is Tabernacles. And Shaul the emissary likens the present Yerushalayim, his time Yerushalayim, with Hagar the bondwoman and her children. Galatians 4:25. I said I'll read it later. Here it is. For Sinai is a mountain in Arab or Arabia, as it says in English, and it corresponds to the present Yerushalayim, for she is in slavery with her children. So the present Yerushalayim of Shaul's time was in slavery with her children because she rejected her Messiah, that is Yahusha HaMashiach. She rejected the appointed time. The appointment was with him, and that she missed, and that's the reason she is compared to as Hagar. And Hagar in Hebrew means a fugitive, a stranger. Gar means stranger. Alright, and Hagar is somebody who is a fugitive or somebody who is fleeing away from the covenant, not in the covenant. So which of the above commands are you following, knowing that we are in dispersion and not in the land? And we read in James chapter 1 verses 1 and 1 Peter 1 verses 1, where James says, James, a servant of Elohim, of Adon, Yahusha the Messiah, ask for peace to the 12 tribes who are in dispersion. So the 12 tribes, where are they? They are in dispersion. Are they in the land? No. Dispersion means they are scattered. 1 Peter 1 verses 1. Kepha, an apostle of Yahusha the Messiah, to the inhabitants scattered. See the word scattered throughout Pontus, Galatia, Cappadocia, Asia and Bithynia. Alright, now the historical evidence which I said, by the rivers of Babylon, Psalms 137 verses 1. By the rivers of Babylon, where we sat down, also we wept when we remembered Sion. Verse 2. Upon the willows in the midst of it we hung our harps. Verse 3. For there our captors asked us the words of a song, and our tormentors mirth, saying, sing us one of the songs of Sion. Verse 4. How can we sing the song of Yahuah in a foreign land? Then we read in Hosea chapter 2 verses 9 to 11. It says, therefore I shall return and take my grain at the harvest time and my new wine in its season. I shall take away my wool and my flax to cover her nakedness. Verse 10. Then I shall uncover their shamefulness in the sight of her lovers, and a man shall not deliver her out of my hand. Verse 11. I shall also put an end to all her joy, her feasts, her Kadashim, that is the new months, and her Shabbats, and all her solemn feasts, which is the Moed. So this was, the prophecy related to Yahudah's Babylonian captivity, right, where Yahuah says that he'll put an end to all her feasts. The same thing we read in Revelation chapter 17 and chapter 18 about mystery Babylon. There's no more song of mirth. The voice of the bride and the bridegroom is heard no more in her. So all these things are written. So in Hosea, Yahuah says he will return to take his grain at the harvest time and his new wine in its season. But will YasharEL or Yahudah be able to offer it? No, they won't, as they will be in captivity or dispersion of nations. So he puts an end to all her joy, her new moons, her Sabbaths, and all her feasts. Hence the recovery of the grain and new wine in their seasons refer to elect who will be gathered by Yahusha himself. So this is what happened to them as prophesied by Yirmiyahu. 2 Chronicles 36 verses 20 and 21. We see this from a historical perspective of their captivity, and them that had escaped from the sword he carried away to Babel, and they were servants to him and to his sons until the rule of the kingdom of Persia or Paras, to fulfill the word of Yahuah by the mouth of Yirmiyahu, until the land had enjoyed its Sabbaths all the days of its desolation. It kept its Shabbat to fulfill 70 years, which means while Yahudah was in captivity for 70 years, there was no sowing and reaping, there was no Shemitah, there was no Jubilee in the land. The poor of the land ate what grew of itself, and the land was in desolation. So as long as it was in desolation, it kept its Shabbat, because the land grew of itself. All the fruits, different kind of plants and shrubs that are required for survival, everything grew of itself for those 70 years. See the historical perspective, all tied to the land, the Shemitah of the land. The seventh day Shabbat is tied to the land and the Shemitah. How does the counting of Omar take place? 7 into 7 Shabbats plus 1. That is the 50th day. So you have to count a Shabbat to reach to a 50th day in Shavuot or Pentecost, isn't it? It's inculcated, it is bound in it. One cannot take bits and pieces of Shemitah and show a false observance to Yahuah in foreign lands. You have to go up to Yerushalayim, the place Yahuah chose to place his name. Now as we read, Shaul the emissary likened physical Yerushalayim to Hagar, who is in bondage with her children. Abraham believed in the promise and looked for the city whose foundations and builder is Elohim. Hence there is a waiting time to enter into a perpetual, that is Olam, rest in renewed Yerushalayim. And that's why we have Yahusha HaMashiach saying he's going to prepare a place for us, and we who believe in him are invited to the marriage supper of the Lamb. And this is also very interesting. When Yahusha had the Pishak meal before his death, this is what he said, Luke chapter 22 verses 14. And when the hour had come, he sat down and the 12 emissaries with him. Verse 15, and he said to them, with desire I have desired to eat this Pishak with you before my suffering. Verse 16, for I say to you, I shall certainly not eat of it again until it is filled in the reign of Elohim. So he says, I will not eat of this grain or of this minka until it is fulfilled in the reign of Elohim. And verse 17, and taking the cup, giving thanks, he said, take this and divide it among yourselves. Verse 18, for I say to you, I shall certainly not drink of the fruit of the vine until the reign of Elohim comes. So my dear friend, right, ask yourself, when the Adon himself is not going to have the bread and the cup, all right, until his reign comes. So how are you doing it in pagan lands? Who are you to do it in pagan lands? What is the significance of the marriage supper of the Lamb for you, all right, as it is to Yahusha HaMashiach, who is going to have it with his elect, in renewed Yerushalayim? Isn't this so clear? So ask yourself, why did Yahusha say he will not eat of the Pishak again or drink of the wine until the reign of Elohim comes? Did not Shaul the emissary bring discipline in the Corinthian assembly as they were having the bread and the cup as celebrating Pesach every Shabbat. And that's why he said, some of you are judged and are dead. Alright, so the institution of Pesach found its fulfillment in Yahusha, because he is the Pesach lamb. Yet we see that the Corinthian assembly, as often as they gathered, as do assemblies today as well, they partake of the bread and and the cup. How ridiculous that can be. 1 Corinthians 11 verses 23 to 27. For I received from the Adon that which I also delivered to you, that the Master Yahusha, in the night in which he was delivered up, took bread, and having given thanks, he broke it and said, Take, eat, this is my body, which is broken for you. Do this in remembrance of me. He did not tell to break the bread to do it in remembrance of me, but the word remembrance is zakar, means you remember me. That's what he said. In the same way also the cup after supper, saying the cup, this cup is the renewed covenant in my blood. As often as you drink it, do this in remembrance of me. So that was the institution, that was the purpose of the Pesach, not that it has to be kept in the a pagan land. Right? So when are you going to drink of it? When the master himself is not going to drink of it. So as often as you drink it, do this in remembrance of me. Then why does he say, for as often as you eat this bread and drink this cup, you proclaim the death of the master until he comes? So that whoever should eat this bread or drink this cup of the master unworthily shall be guilty of the body and blood of the master. Alright, and then he goes on to say that judgment has fallen upon many of you, because some of you are dead. I'll just read out those verses. For verse 29, for the one who is eating and drinking unworthily eats and drinks judgment to himself, not discerning the body of the master. For of this many are weak and sick among you, and many sleep. The word sleep is the same word for death. For if we were to examine ourselves, we would not be judged. But when we are judged, we are disciplined by the master, that we should not be condemned with the world. Okay, so the message was very clear to the Corinthian assembly. All right, so he brought a lot of discipline. If you read chapter 14 about tongues, so they were speaking with an gibberish tongue, I would say, right? And that was not the gift of languages that happened on the day of Shavuot. So there were a lot of things that the Corinthian assembly picked up from the pagan practices, and they were incorporating it into the assembly, thinking that these are the gifts of Yahusha to them. But with the emissary shawl bringing in discipline to them, they would have understood what the breaking of the bread and drinking of the cup means, right? And when they are supposed to have it, and what spiritual significance it has. All right, it is a remembrance of the death of the Adon. All right, so he is telling them to remember the death of the Adon. He's not telling them to every Shabbat to break the bread and drink the cup and proclaim the death of the masters, because you cannot have Pesach every Shabbat, and not at all in promised land. In pagan land, and not at all in an uncircumcised state, which we will see a bit later. So the emissaries initially in the transitional phase broke bread house to house, as people had to be taught the fulfillment doctrines in Messiah, and they abided in the apostles' doctrine itself. They were continuing steadfastly in the teachings of the emissaries, and in the fellowship, and in the breaking of bread, and in the prayers. Now we have passed the transitional phase, unless you are still as a babe drinking milk and not eating solid meat. When you read Acts 2:42, and they were continuing steadfastly in the teaching of the emissaries, and in the fellowship, and in the breaking of bread, and in the prayers. So that's how the emissary Shaul, all right, who was an emissary to the Gentiles, all right, would have spoken to the Corinthian assembly about this breaking of bread and drinking of the cup in that transitional phase. Are you getting what I'm trying to say? All right, but it was being misused. The transitional phase, all right, was being misused by doing it every Shabbat. Whenever they gathered together as an assembly, so they continued to do it, which is abomination to Yahuah. I hope you understand what I'm trying to say, because it was a transitional phase, and they, as Ephesians 2:20, I think it says, let me just grab that verse for you. Ephesians 2 verse 20, where Shaul says, having built upon the foundation of the emissaries, that is the apostles, and the prophets, Yahusha Mashiach himself being the chief cornerstone. So the foundation was built by the emissaries, that is the apostles and the prophets. Alright, so when the foundational teachings are being taught, alright, they were breaking the bread and drinking from the cup from house to house in the initial transitional phase until they came to a complete transition into Yahusha Mashiach, when they understood that when they had to stop. But Corinthian assembly did not stop. They continued to do this thing, which is why Shaul speaks or rebukes them, you can say. So coming back to the Shemitah, Genesis records that Yahuah had not caused it to rain on the earth. Now this is very interesting. And a mist went up from the ground and watered the earth, for there was no man to till the ground. In a Shemitah year, no sowing and reaping happens. So here Eden was dressed by Yahuah himself, as there was no rain and no man to till the ground. So when you read Genesis chapter 2 verses 4 to 6, it says, these are the births of the heavens and the earth, when they were created in the day that Yahuah Elohim made the earth and the heavens. Now no shrub of the field was yet on the earth, and no plant of the field had yet sprung up, for Yahuah Elohim had not sent rain on the earth, and there was no man to till the ground. But a mist went up from the earth and watered the entire surface of the ground. So this happened in Eden before man was created. So Shemitah, who was observing the Shemitah? Yahuah himself, because there was no man to till the ground. So during Shemitah, the land is left to lie fallow, and all agricultural activity, including plowing, planting, pruning, and harvesting, is forbidden. Speaking of YasharEL's dispersion into the nations, Yahuah foretold them when giving them the promised land. Now when you read Leviticus 26 verses 33 to 35, it says, and I shall scatter you among the nations and draw out a sword after you, and your land shall be a desert and your cities ruins, and the land enjoy its Sabbaths as long as it lies waste, and you are in your enemy's land. Then the land would rest and enjoy its Sabbaths. Verse 35, as long as it lies waste, it rests for the time. It did not rest on your Shabbats when you dwelt in it. Didn't we read the same thing in 2 Chronicles 36 verses 21? The prophecy of Jeremiah. Where did Jeremiah pick it up from? From Torah. He understood Torah. So I do not know how you people look at Torah, and how can you all miss these important aspects of the Torah. So the infinite Elohim made the entire creation by entering into it in 6 days, and the seventh day he rested from all his works. The cycle of 7 shows that each day is reckoned as 1000 years, as stated in 2 Peter chapter 3 verses 8. I've already touched based upon this. A day for 1000 years, and 1000 years as 1 day. Alright, so the 7 days of creation in Genesis 1, alright, speak of the 7,000 years, right, which are designated for man. 6,000 for man, the 7,000th year, the 1000 year which is the eternal rest in Yahusha Mashiach. Only the elect will pass through, all right, from this side to that side to the eternal and perpetual rest for the purpose that it was made. But if you are going to go back to the land, and this reminds me of one brother who has, he has grown long beard, and there are a lot of followers on his page. He has now started writing books, talks about Torah, Moses covenant, being the covenant. And someone asked him a question that do we look at the new moon to observe the feast? He said, no, you don't have to look at the new moon. Just look at the barley in the land, and from there you start your cycle of calendar. From there you start your calendar. And I had a very hearty laugh, because fellow is sitting in USA and he's telling you to look at YasharEL, the land of YasharEL, the barley over there, and then you determine the start of the year and you start your calendar. How ridiculous this can be. And how does he observe the Torah? He's sitting in USA, whereas 3 times a year he's supposed to go up to the temple in Yerushalayim, but there's no temple over there, right? I can't understand how people can fall for all this. Okay, so I won't get into the sevens, right, because there are a lot of sevens in scripture, which I have covered major of it in my previous study, so you can go through the note. Let me come down. Okay, Hebrews 9:22 says, almost all things according to Torah are purified by blood, and without shedding of blood there is no remission of sins. So Yahuah put everything under the Shemitah cycle of favor and judgment to transition creation into freedom from slavery to the completeness of Mashiach. A transition from a physical Shemitah to spiritual Shemitah in Mashiach in the renewed creation order. Alright, so it was very important for YasharEL to be driven out of the land, alright, because by being in the land they were not obeying the Shemitah in the way or in its eternal purpose that it was given. So the eternal purpose could only be found when YasharEL would be in dispersion, and when they meet the appointed one, that is Yahusha, and they would realize, right, how they have fallen and in a miserable condition, and be saved and be cleansed by his blood and be renewed, and wait for the renewed Yerushalayim, as Abraham looked to the heavenly country, right, whose city and maker is Elohim. And Stephen in Acts 7 says that not a foot of the land was given to Abraham, though he sojourned that land, and he sojourned it as a stranger or alien along with the heirs of the same promise, Jacob and Ishak and Jacob. So if they lived as strangers, who are we to look at the barley in the land and start the carnal practices? So all generations from Abraham to Mashiach were 42, which is 14 plus 14 plus 14, or 7 into 2 plus 7 into 2 plus 7 into 2. Alright, so all fits into the number 42, which is the Shemitah cycle of 6 into 7. The 6th day the man was created, alright, and the man was created fleshly into 7, alright, kept under the Shemitah, alright, to be transitioned, alright, to the spiritual Shemitah in Yahusha HaMashiach. 6 into 7 is 42. It's the same period where we see in the book of Revelation, where the covenant YasharEL flees into the wilderness, alright, for 1260 days, alright, which is the same 42 months, period of 42 months, where the Gentiles are trampling the outer court as stated in Revelation 11. I won't go into all these things because I've covered it very much in detail about the 1260 days, times and dividing of time where the word Muad, Muadim and Katsei, all right, where the same word used for feast. Daniel chapter 12 verses 7 and Revelation chapter 12, it talks about the woman is nourished in the wilderness for times and dividing of time, which is Muad, Muadim and Katsei. And Daniel speaks about the power of the set apart people being scattered. All right, so this is that period. Okay, what is interesting and important for us to know that these 42 generations from Abraham to Messiah saw Abraham's seed struggling in the pains of sojourning as strangers in the land of promise. Then they were brought into the land, but David's physical seed, who were heirs to his throne, were not faithful to Yahuah and hence were taken into captivity until the coming of the promised seed, that is Yahusha HaMashiach. So there was a spiritual, physical as well as a spiritual captivity that happened in, from the time the promise came to Abraham till the promised seed Yahusha HaMashiach, who is the only one who can deliver us from the captivity. Because I think Ephesians 4 verses 10, if I'm not mistaken, it says, yes, here it is. It's talking about Yahusha Mashiach. He who went down is also the one who went up far above all heavens to fill all. And I should read from verse 8. It says, this is why it says, when he went up on high, he led captivity captive. Can you see this? He led captivity captive and gave gifts to men. Alright, so what does Torah say? That you need to appear before your Elohim not without a gift, and 3 times a year you have to appear before him. But here we see the love of a Yahusha, who is Yahuah himself in a transition form. Alright, he leads our captivity captive, and he is the one who gives gifts to men. Alright, so just as if you read, this reminds me of Samuel's father Elkanah, alright, who gave portions to his wife Peninnah and Hannah. He gave them portions to offer it to Yahuah year on year when they went to worship during the feasts. And this was the time when Hannah was barren, and she cried before Yahuah because she was barren and Yahuah had not opened a womb. And we know that later Yahuah opened a womb, and she had promised that the first child, the male child, will come through her. She will dedicate and give him to Yahuah, to his service. So let's not get into that, but what I'm trying to say is, when he went up on high, he led captivity captive and gave gifts unto men. He is the one who gave gifts unto us. We do not go up to Yerushalayim anymore with a gift, because there is no tithe, there is no offering, there is nothing that you can give to Yahuah except for your heart, alright, and your heart condition, which needs to be broken, and in repentance, accepting his Shemitah and his provision in your life. Alright, so I hope you understand what great mystery lies in this one verse, which is from Psalms 68 verses 18, which says, you have ascended on high, you have led captivity captive, you have received gifts among men, and even the rebellious, that Yah Elohim might dwell there. So it says you have received gifts among men. So he is at the receiving end and he is at the giving end. And here Shaul talks about he giving gifts to men. Psalms talks about he received gifts among men. So can you see that? He is the offering, right? He is the one, the high priest, the Melchizedek high priest, alright, who does everything according to the Torah. Everything is fulfilled in him. He is at the receiving end, he is at the giving end. You don't have to do anything, just believe on him. And verse 9 says, but what does he went up mean, except that he also first went down into the lower parts of the earth? Verse 10, and he who went down is also the one who went up far above all heavens to fill all. Okay, and these are the gifts that he gave us: emissaries, prophets, evangelists, shepherds, teachers, for the perfecting of the set apart ones, to the work of service, to building up of the body of Messiah. So these, the fivefold ministry, as we say, right, which is in him, because he is the apostle, prophet, priest, king, okay, the teacher, the rabbi, everything is in him. So he has given us those gifts so that we grow up from drinking, right from the time of drinking milk to digesting of solid meat. So Hosea 11 verses 1, when YasharEL was a child, I loved him, and out of Mitzrayim I called my son. Matthew 2 verses 15, and remained there until the death of Herod, to fill what was spoken by Yahuah through the prophet, saying, out of Mitzrayim I have called my son. So Yahusha came as the YasharEL of Elohim. So we all fall into the sonship inheritance, being delivered from the bondage of slavery, and this was only possible when Yahushua HaMashiach took a finite position in creation, coming as the son and being part of the Shemitah cycle to deliver us from the bondage of slavery. When Yahuwah rested on the seventh day, he ceased from all his work, as his work of salvation was finished from the foundation of this world and completed in time, when he subjected himself to be part of creation in humility, by transforming himself and journeying us in himself as the renewed creation. So some recommended videos or reading: Transition to Pre-Torah Age, which is on my YouTube channel, and why did Yahusha mikveh in the wilderness, which is in the note form on my blog spot. I've placed both these links in this note. Yahukanan, the immerser, was a Zadok priest lineage. His father Zachariah served in the Hekel as a priest. So why did Yahukanan or John not serve as a priest in the temple and came with a message of repentance in the wilderness? So this note covers it all. I have also touched base on the Yonah or dove significance in this note. So you can have a look at this note. Okay, so I will end this part 1 and I will continue in part 2, because we have already crossed 1 hour 7 minutes. So until I see you in part 2, may Yahusha barak you. Hallelujah.